Fiona Ramsay is a South African actress and dialogue coach. She kindly accepted my invitation to tell us her story. We will hear how Fiona's entrepreneurial spirit took her where she is now, how doors opened in her life, and how she went through them, the change of identity when moving from theatre to film, and how job defines your personality, the importance of imagination in an actor's life, her coaching experience with Idris Elba on Log Walk to Freedom, and much more. Fiona, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's wonderful to hear you again, Laura, and to connect, and shows you just 6 degrees of separation, one is just very close to everything, and we always reconnect again.
So when I met you, you were actually playing a character called Mrs. Mapleton, but you were also having a second role, which was dialogue coach. So what I would like to ask you is, how did you start your career as an actress, and what took you then to become also a dialogue coach?
Well, I actually started out like a lot of young people, young girls start out particularly. As a ballet dancer, I wanted to be a ballerina. And I think pretty early on in my life, I realized I wasn't going to be a dancer. I was going to not be at the lead, that's for sure. I was going to be in the corps de ballet, which didn't have as much appeal as being the prima ballerina. So it kind of, at school I was interested in theatre, but actually I wanted to be a doctor.
Oh.
And it's quite interesting that, I wanted to be a doctor, that I really believe that a doctor fulfilled the most worthwhile kind of vocation in life, because you were helping people. And sadly, when I got to university, I went to the University of Cape Town. When I got to Cape Town, my maths marks and my science marks were nowhere near as good as my kind of arts marks. And I asked if I could do one course in science and one course in the arts, and you weren't allowed to in those days. So I don't know whether I might have ended up as a doctor. But anyway, it seemed logical that I would be an actor. I always thought that is where I felt most comfortable. It's where I felt I could give something, and it's something I felt quite confident that I could do. And I think as a young person, there's so many things you can't do, that was really something that I felt I could do. I mean, I felt useless sometimes because it's not all easy sailing, but you do. So I graduated from UCT and automatically went into the theatre, although I was not immediately castable. You mentioned that I played Lady Mapleton, Mrs. Mapleton, who is a character. So I was not an actress that was going to leave university and be cast as young, the young juvenile lead. I was always slightly more dominant than that as a personality. And so, I started my own theatre company right after leaving drama school to do work that I wouldn't necessarily be cast in by other people. And so, I carried on acting, and I did theatre mainly. And then I basically, television came to South Africa very late. I did a few television things, but so I work as an actress, and I still work as an actress, for 40 years. But what happens to you is that along the way, doors open, and you just have to go through them. That's my motto in life. You have to go through them, because you can't necessarily make a living off acting alone. Because, one day you'll be Flavour of the Month, and you'll be in 2 television series, one after the other, and you'll be leads, and the next minute you'll be a couple of calls in a year. So when they asked me if I could do dialogue coaching, I'd never done it before, I have to tell you, Laura, and I just said yes. And I went and read up. And I think that's a lot of my life has been like that. I remember once I was asked if I could roller skate for an advert that was being shot in Cape Town at the Mooley Point where people were on roller skates and they served cars. I can't remember what your drive-ins they were called, where you had milkshakes next to the cars and hamburgers. And I said, yes, I can roller skate. Well, it was for a commercial and I couldn't roller skate at all. And in fact, they eventually said to me, just stand. You're going to be the lazy waitress that doesn't do any work. So what I'm saying is, you just have to say yes. And then, you'll be the lazy waitress or the person that can't play the trumpet if you say you can. So my motto in life is just go through those doors that open and something will happen. My interest in voice, in voice and accents and that sort of thing, propelled me into dialogue coaching, really.
So when you said you came out of university, so you hadn't really started drama or acting, right? And how did you get your first job?
I made my first job. We wrote to someone a play that we'd read, and I wanted to play the part. So we actually just went out and started a theatre company and hired a theatre. And I must say that when I came out of university, you had to beg, borrow, and steal money. But, hiring a theatre was much cheaper than it is now. So you could really hire a theatre and you only needed to pay at the end of the week, the first week that you were in. So, and your prices were much more, doable. Nowadays, you need something like 100,000 rand. I don't know what that would be in euro, but you need an enormous amount of investment before you start. So I was very lucky that happened then. But, gradually I auditioned and gradually I got, known. And then, I never seemed to be out of work for a certain period. And it's actually interesting, Laura, what happens to you. Because you're in work. In South Africa, we were in work. So you were rehearsing a play in the morning. And then in the evening, you were in a play. So you were continually in the public eye and you were continually in the press. And a really strange thing happened to me. As soon as that stopped and I went into film, when I wasn't, because film, obviously, you don't go into newspapers because it's not a daily thing. You're not advertised daily. I felt like I didn't exist as a human being. My entire identity was astray, which is very interesting that your job can so define you by what you do every day and how what you put into your job every day, that it can so define you as a personality, as a person, that I had to kind of relearn how to be a person doing television, which, is very different to theatre.
You're right. And so is that one of the doors that opened to you, TV?
Yes. Well, I think it was a natural progression, but in a way, because you can't necessarily just stay in theatre. And, well, you could, but it was something that you reach a wider audience, you reach more people. It's a different medium. It's using the same skills. So I suppose also I'm very, very curious. I'm a very curious person. And if someone said to me, what is a quality an actor needs? And I think it is curiosity about other people far more than it is about your interest in yourself or self-development. And I think that's sometimes something that people don't really understand. I teach a lot of actors, and a lot of people think that because they're passionate about acting and because they want to be the center of attention, that is the quality you need to be an actor. When in fact, actually, what you want to do as an actor is you want to interpret other people's lives. So you're actually interested in other people's psychology and other people's lives and other people's stories that you can tell as your own in a way, or So, yeah, I suppose it was a natural progression because you reach more people in television. In theatre, you have 200 people, maybe 500, maybe at the most 1,000 or 2,000 people in a theatre. Television, millions are watching you a night.
It's true. Also, the feedback of the audience is different. I mean, you have it when you're in theater, and you maybe can guess it when you are shooting in front of a camera. What kind of character traits must an actor have in order to resist at this job? Because it is not all glamorous like we all think. Someone who is an actor has had to have the passion, the patience, and so forth. What would you say are the most important traits in someone's character in order to persist doing this job?
Well, I think you have to have an enormous amount of resilience. And when I say resilience, I mean people will be negative. You will be out of about 10 jobs that you go and audition for. You might get one, you might get none. You might be offered 3 and have to choose. What a luxury. But you need to be resilient against negativity. And I think that that's why a lot of actors fall prey to sometimes personal breakdown or upset, or they like drugs to take them out of life, or, whatever. Because it's such a demanding, on your own psyche. I mean, I always liken, if you're a musician, you can blame your lack of success or your nobody wanting to listen to you on your instrument. With acting, it's only you. It's not your painting. It's not something objective. It's you. It's a very subjective experience. So I think resilience is one, but I think curiosity, as I mentioned, and I think energy and stamina. I think you need an enormous amount of energy to be an actor, because you have long hours, whether you're on stage, and you need a lot of energy to project, to be on stage, or whether it's long hours on a film set where you have to wait around. You may only get to your scene later in the day, and you have to then be ready to do it. So I think energy is one of the most important things. Energy, resilience, and curiosity, interest in other people. Without that, I think you're quite a boring actor.
How about memorizing lines? When I think of being an actress, and I did want to be an actress when I was much younger, I was really afraid of forgetting a line. And my memory is so bad that I said, you know what? No acting and no lawyer. I'm not going to be a lawyer because I'm not going to remember any of the laws. How do you find, is it important to memorize?
Well, I think that, depending in theatre, it's certainly important to memorize lines. And very often you have monologues or soliloquies or, where you're not prompted by other people on what to say. So, you really need a good recall. But, memorizing the lines is one of the basic fundamental techniques that an actor learns. And different actors use different things. Some people use visual images. I use letters. So if I have to say important and pathetic, the P will be very important to me. Some people say, how can you learn your lines like that? Because it doesn't have anything to do with the sense of what you're saying. So I think people have different ways of learning it. But I always say to people, learning line is the easiest. It's what to do with your hands that's the hardest, because, your hands and your body just sort of flap around sometimes and don't contribute to what you're saying. So I often think it's the physicality of the character. Even if it's on screen, it's the physicality of what to do with your eyes, and your voice. How, those are far more difficult than learning lines, I think. I think learning lines is kind of it's easy.
And how much do you think is the weight of, let's say, learning to be an actor and actually having it in you? Because you said that you have just started being an actress and you had your own theater. But do you feel the need or to actually have some more training on the side, like following courses and going to a film academy? Or how do you see the balance between the two?
I think that actors never stop learning, and I think it's very obvious in actors that you see that have stopped learning or have stopped being curious to learn. I teach a lot, and therefore I think I learn a lot from my teaching. I learn a lot from the students that I teach. But I think it is important to continue taking classes, even if it's a class that you decide to take. I'm going to take a class on grief, how to express grief, or that it can be very, very specific. These courses become very specific. I train a lot of actors who are, established actors, and in accents, to prepare for a role in accents. And it's incredible how much they learn from the coaching of just an accent that actually is acting. And I think the balance between natural talent, some people have natural talent and they can go on screen and be brilliant, but without technique, they won't last, or they will suffer a lot of problems on the way, because whether they're psychological or whether they will be typecast, they don't necessarily need to be psychological, but I think technique is something you need to fall back on because you work such ridiculous hours, and also because you're asked to be very, very emotional. Very often roles are emotional. You cannot cry every night for 9 months for an entire 3-hour play. You'd end up in a lunatic asylum. So you need to learn a technique to be able to do that. But I think it is a balance. And I think I always say there's one thing that I can teach an actor most things, but I cannot teach him her creativity. And I think that is the one imagination. I can stimulate the imagination, but I can't teach someone how to have an imagination. And I think that is the strongest tool in an actor's kit, is to imagine that they are the King of England or the Queen of Golds, whatever, what's it called? Twilight of the Gods or whatever, you know what I mean? It's to believe that you're an alien or that you are whatever you have to be. And I think that element is very important for an actor, that is unteachable.
When is a dialogue coach required?
So a dialogue coach can be required for a number of reasons. It's usually for an accent where someone speaks. For example, I did dialogue coaching for Idris Elba, who played Nelson Mandela in The Long Walk to Freedom. He's Cockney. He'd lived in America. He'd come to a certain amount of fame doing Stringer Bean in some American television series. I forget the name of it, but it was very, very successful. So he'd done a lot of other work that wasn't British, but he'd never done an African accent, despite his parents both being from the African continent. So you're employed to do that. Sometimes you're employed as a dialogue coach to help people with lines, just with being able to deliver lines when it's not their first language. They're speaking with their same accent, but you're helping them speak another language. So it's an array of things, but mostly what I do is accents. And a lot of my work has been, in the early time of my doing it, teaching overseas people to be South African characters, like Nelson Mandela, like Winnie Mandela, like Afrikaans heroes and things like that. But I do a lot of dialogue coaching now where I teach South Africans to be American or South Africans to be British and vice versa. So it's really to do with language and how someone can inhabit a character fully, and so that it doesn't seem false. So what I go for is authenticity. If you're a dialogue coach that is hired for a specific actor or for a specific show, I did the dialogue for Roots. So I taught about 20 actors from all over the world to be from Africa. And so I had to homogenize all their accents, really. But so you do pre-production. And then with Idris Elba, for example, I was on set every single day with him. I did have an isiXhosa coach with me because obviously Nelson Mandela spoke Xhosa. And although the actor didn't need to, it was important that there was a coach that spoke the language. I wouldn't be presumptuous. So, Laura, I mean, you're Italian, right?
Yes, I am.
So I would have you with me. If I had to teach an Italian accent, I'd have you with me so that you could, you were authentic,
Yep. Yeah.
I'm sort of saying it's not something. I have a facility for accents, but so you're on set, you're pre-production and on set, and then you do post-production because you very often have to be in ADR where they do post-dubbing and syncing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you just tell what is ADR? Because I'm sure not many people know.
Well, a lot of people call it all sorts of different things. It's audio digital recording, but other people have lots of different names for it. But it's basically when you have to redo the sound to a film. And so you have to revoice it. You have to sit in a booth at a studio and you have to redo the lines because there was a waterfall behind you, or, they couldn't get the sound right, or your microphone wasn't working, or in fact, the director doesn't like how the scene was and wants to change some inflections. So there are a number of reasons why it's done. But it's interesting, Laura, that a lot of actors who I met in America when I was recently there before lockdown do the entire performances on ADR. They don't. They have that in their contract that they can then revoice their whole performance after they see what they've done on the screen, which is fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Going back to acting, do you recall your most memorable role you played? One that you can still remember today that you want to share with us?
Well, I played a role called Decadence. And in this play, it was a play by a British playwright called Stephen Burkhoff, who was very revolutionary at the time. And it was a criticism, the play Decadence was a criticism of British class systems everywhere in the world, but British upper class and lower class. And so it was it was written in Shakespearean rhyming couplets, but it was very modern. And it was very intense language and very visceral and a lot of mime. And so I did that production in 1982. And I did it again in 1992. And I did it 10 years later in 2002. We unfortunately didn't do it in 2012, but 2022 we might do it again. And it's a fantastic play. The audience just gets absolutely caught up, and it's such a visceral experience. You can't kind of explain it, but you need to be very fit because I have to horse ride. I have to do a horse riding, and it's very, very energetic as well as being kind of quite cerebral. So that's my aim. So I've got something to look forward to, Laura. 2022.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's like around the corner, by the way. You were talking about COVID. Has that impacted your professional life, knowing that fewer shows have made it to South Africa because of pandemic restrictions?
Well, I'm very fortunate because I'm doing my PhD and in drama. And I became a lecturer at the university to do my PhD. So I was very, very fortunate that I'm the head of the department now.
Oh, wow.
Because that would be me. Well, that would be me. I can't just be, as I said, when I started the interview, I said, if I couldn't be the prima ballerina, I didn't want to dance. So I became the head of the department. So that has kept me busy. But in terms of acting, a lot of my colleagues, the theatres are empty. And although 2 days ago, I actually went and gave a workshop at a theatre, and the theatre is 1,000-seater, and it had 100 people in it. Wow. Because all the chairs in between were empty. And so obviously that's impacted financially because you can't make as much revenue. There are pockets of theatres being done. In terms of film, I was lucky. I did 3 films last year. But, it's very rigid COVID regulations. And of course, as soon as someone tests positive on the set, the whole set has to close down, which is, again, expensive. And some film companies don't survive, and it never, the project never gets finished, or completed. But I think it's had an enormous toll. It's had an enormous toll on the acting fraternity. We have no support system in South Africa. We have no social grants to actors or things like that. We have social grants for unemployed people, but those are also very, very little. So a lot of actors have lost houses, they've lost their cars, they have no future of work in the pipeline for the moment, and so a lot of them have gone off and done other things. So it's COVID has really taken its toll globally on everybody, in every walk of life. Mm. And I suppose what it does to the actor is just makes him more resilient. Trying to be positive. Yeah.
Yes, going back to resilience and patience too, because I remember when I came to set every once in a while, sneaking in, there was so much waiting time, and I was thinking, my God, to be an actor, you really have to be patient, and waiting is a lot of your daily job, which is very remarkable. I must say, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, it's interesting that some actors do practical things. Some actors do practical things like they knit, or they, when they're waiting, they knit or they crochet, or they do that sort of thing. Crosswords. A lot of actors do crosswords. Mm. I mean, I couldn't do that. I do a lot of work. I would write a show. I would write a paper. I was very busy in my trailer. I was quite happy in my trailer, always, not having to go on to set, because I would keep. So that's part of the resilience, to keep yourself awake, engaged. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of the kind of job that makes it easier, that makes the patience work.
So for young men and women who are very tempted by this world of acting, the world of filmmaking, and they would love to become actors, they of course see the point of the iceberg, right? Those who have made it there and so forth. They don't necessarily know what awaits them if they embark on this adventure. So what advice would you give to an aspiring actor, an aspiring actress at the very early stage of their career?
Well, I think that, there's so much pressure on young actors or young aspirant actors now, because you have to earn a living, you have to earn money. And the money that you earn from theatre or from acting in the early days is, your jobs are few and far between. So I would always say, have something that you can do to pay the bills, whether it's, have a backup. The tragedy is that if that backup becomes your main source of income and acting just becomes like a hobby, that's very, that becomes sad. But I think make your own work. That is one of the things that has kept me going. I still make my own work. I wrote something last year with another actor, Graham Hopkins, and we did it for the Hilton Festival, and we're going to do it again. And it was just a little online thing. Make your own work. It also, making your own work, writing your own work, or getting together with people that are like you if you can't write. Get together with someone that thinks like you, and just do a two-hander and film it, put it on YouTube. There's so much social media available. But I think it's important to learn while you're doing that, to take classes, to go and have a class on accents, to go and have a class on film acting, to go and have a class on, on all aspects of, on classics, on modern, you got to just keep on learning. But do your own work. If you make your own work, you learn so much through it, Mm-hmm. So that's my advice.
Thank you so much, Fiona, for being so open and supportive.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. Really, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you and to reconnect.
I hope you have enjoyed. Stay tuned, as next episode, Hamish MacLeod will tell us how to be an armourer and sword master in the film industry. Please drop me a line at jobtalespodcast@gmail.com if you have any interview to suggest and comments about my podcast, as I'm here to learn with you. Ciao!